GamesComm 2023 is currently undergoing, and Steam has showcased a number of the games that are premiering at the convention with free-to-play demos that you can check out in the Steam store. These demos being released are a great and free way to try out some new games to see what might be on the horizon, and of course try things out risk-free. So let's take a look at 3 game demos that I tried out that you may want to try out too. Okay, so the first game that I checked out was Soulslinger. So this was marked as an FPS roguelike on the Steam store, and what drew me to it was it's an FPS roguelike. I've always been really interested in roguelikes. I've always really enjoyed the roguelike style, that kind of idea of infinite replayability where you're constantly kind of being faced with a new set of challenges, randomized challenges at that, and being told, hey, you got to figure it out. I've always enjoyed kind of that the infinite replayability of that, and usually for the most part, roguelites are usually pretty quick to pick up and play. So this one, fast and frenetic shooter, it makes me feel a lot like Doom had a baby with Binding of Isaac, which is a scary thought because the subject matter of Binding of Isaac and the art style of Doom kind of gives me a little bit of a creepy feeling. But again, the action is fast, the combat is very fun, it's very low skill ceiling, the movement is very simplified. You've got very similar movement tools to Doom where you've got this air dash. You move kind of like 1,000,000 miles per hour, and you're constantly trying to shoot and move at the same time while you're dodging different enemies and stuff inside combat arenas. The setting is very interesting, and this is kind of what drew my eye to its entry inside the Steam page, is that it's kind of a Wild West / fantasy setting to where there's a lot of Wild West items and aesthetics in it. Like like it's a 6-shooter, and the guy himself looks very much like a cowboy. There are multiple levels that you play through in the demo where they're very much like kind of Western towns, and they're kind of Western, locales. Like there's a saloon. There's like, oh hey, look, there's there's farming implements and stuff scattered all over the place and inside of a desert. But there's also some fantasy elements. You are kind of working for Death. You are ostensibly one of his envoys, and you are trying to kind of I can't really say what the end goal is of the main character, but you're kind of cleaning up after Death because he can't do it himself, kind of guiding these souls to the afterlife, to help pay some sort of deal or some sort of deal or bargain that you made with him to see your dead wife. Kind of hard to I kind of skipped a little bit of his story just because 30 minutes. I wanted to try to get as much gameplay as possible and make sure I had a decent amount of footage to be able to show you guys kind of what the gameplay looks like. But again, the combat's a very low skill ceiling for shooting and movement. Once you kind of get into the groove of running around the combat arenas and shooting all of the dudes and picking up all the stuff, you kind of you very quickly understand what it is that you can get away with and what you need to stay away from. The combat arenas are kind of something I want to shout out because they're very reminiscent of the most recent Doom games, to where you have kind of a set combat arena that has varying levels of verticality, to where there's like little jump ups, there's places where you can kind of dash over like a pit to create distance between you and the enemies that you're fighting. There are enemies of kind of varying health, like you have kind of your cannon fodder that will go down in 1 or 2 hits, and then you've got kind of the bigger chunkier boys that have like actual health bars that you need to reduce down and try to bring down that way. They hurt a little bit more if you get in too close. You have the explodey enemies that if they get close to you, then they start to, they kind of stand still, and you see like a AoE effect around them to where, hey, this is where I'm going to blow up and hurt you. The progression is roughly what you would imagine in a roguelike. You clear, you get into a room, you clear that room of all of its enemies or whatever it is that it asks you to do, and there's an item at the end that you pick up. Then it's either for progression or it gives you some sort of ability to help you progress through the arena, or you pick up currency that persists through your death. Again, like a roguelike. If you've ever played like Binding of Isaac or Hades, you kind of understand what the the overall rinse and repeat cycle is of the gameplay. Now, outside of the combat arenas, you get typical roguelike fare where you get currency to upgrade your guy, you get blueprints in order to get new weapons and craft new weapons. There seems to be a number of different currencies that they expose you to inside of the demo, but what I played of it, it seems like it's going to be kind of a fun little roguelike shooter if you are into that genre of game. I particularly liked it just because it definitely feels like it's going for that faster, more frenetic style and gives you just that little bit of taste of Doom without having to play through the entirety of Doom, right? And of course, it's a roguelike, right? It's kind of, especially if it follows the same trend of other roguelike games, it's got a lot of replayability. There's almost always a ton of collectibles. There's always a lot of things to upgrade and numbers to make go higher in order to make your run go faster. And this one actually also has kind of a overarching story that seems like it kind of wants you to care about. There are a number of cutscenes that kind of played, and there was some character dialogue. It introduced Death as a character who's kind of like watching over you and providing you bits of his powers so that way you can get through the combat arenas better. And of course, you know, I mentioned before already, but the main character himself seems like he's got kind of an agenda to where he's doing all of this in order to meet his dead wife. So, you know, at the very least, there does seem to be a little bit of conceit outside of just, hey, blow stuff up in the afterlife, right? All right, the next game is something that's kind of near and dear to me, and I did not realize that they were actually going to make it, but a game called SteamWorld Build. So this game is a city builder and management sim. If you're not aware, the SteamWorld genre, well, it's not really a genre, the SteamWorld series of games they all started from a game called SteamWorld Dig. This was kind of like a mining / exploration / side-scrolling platformer, almost, actually it's a Metroidvania. Actually, I don't even know why I'm struggling to find how to describe it. It was a Metroidvania, but it was probably one of the more unique ones that I ever really played, and on top of that, it was just very, very relaxing to play. Metroidvanias are kind of the style of game where you are collecting bits and pieces and abilities to get through the game, solve puzzles and stuff. Well, SteamWorld Build is nothing like that. It is a city builder. It's a management sim, and this goes along with the SteamWorld developers to where they not just make kind of the Metroidvania games, but they also try to branch out into other genres. They've made a card builder and like a kind of a deck building game. They made kind of like an XCOM's side-scrolling, only in a kind of a side-scrolling view. And this one, they decided to make a city builder / management sim. So just like any of the city builder and management sim, you know, you have lots of plates to juggle. You're kind of expanding your town and your citizens, and you are trying to make the numbers stay above a certain amount. Basically, it's plate juggling at its best. The kind of hard to review this one just from the demo because it's pretty, you know, city builders and management sims are pretty slow paced. The first 30 minutes seemed pretty calm to me. There wasn't a whole lot of fires or anything that I really needed to put out. And there wasn't a whole lot with regards to plate juggling, which again, that might be that's part of that is the SteamWorld devs kind of MO is that it's meant to be accessible. But it uses the same steampunk aesthetic that the other SteamWorld games use. Everything's kind of like a steampunk person or a steampunk thing. You know, not only are you it's not just a dog, it's a steampunk dog, right? It's not just a steampunk, it's not just a little girl, it's a steampunk little girl. So it's a charming art style, and of course, I've always really loved the steampunk games, and they always kind of have a neat, quirky, you know, feel good, happy aesthetic to it that just makes you smile as you watch it. The hook for this one and where the difference is in terms of gameplay is instead of kind of expanding outwards like you normally would with a city builder or management sim, you're digging deeper. Like I've seen this in Dungeon Keeper and inside of Dungeons, if you're familiar with the series, is that instead of just building outwards on a layer on the map, you are actually expanding downwards in SteamWorld Dig, which matches with a little bit of the conceit and the SteamWorld Dig style, where you're essentially trying to get to this kind of magic MacGuffin that's deep in the earth So you have to dig downward. And you're collecting resources and stuff to upgrade your city and your builders and like keep your citizens happy along the way. So, keep an eye out for this one. I think it's really, I really, really like the SteamWorld stuff. I've always had like, ever since I played SteamWorld Dig, the first one, I basically any SteamWorld thing that comes out, I try to at least check out and see if it's something that might be fun to play through. All right, the last game that we've got up that I played a demo of was Daymare 1994. So this one was actually a little bit of last minute choice. The original game that I wanted to play synced was the demo was had already either been taken down or it's no longer running, or I don't know, who cares? That's not the point. Daymare 1994 is an action horror third-person shooter. Now, I don't normally check games out like these in demos, mostly because I'm not super into action horror games. There are a couple that I've played over the years. My most favorite ones are in the Resident Evil series. Those are kind of the ones that I usually gravitate to. I was also a big fan of Dead Space. I do want to check out, what was it, the Callisto Protocol, but just haven't gotten a chance to yet. But this one is kind of in that same vein, especially of Resident Evil 4. In fact, you can almost say that, and this may sound reductive, but it has to be said, it feels a lot like Resident Evil 4. Now, I did only play about maybe 20-30 minutes of this, or not 30 minutes, I'm sorry, 20 minutes of this one, and I recorded about that much footage because there were some performance problems with it recording through OBS, and I'm not 100% sure if that just may be the game's not quite optimized yet. But again, we got what we could, and I got what I needed out of it. But I guess ostensibly, this game is Resident Evil, but with more supernatural stuff. It's got aliens, or at least I think it's an alien. I'm not 100% sure. It's got like kind of this glowing orb thing that possesses corpses and makes them stand up, and they're all electrified. That seems to, but instead of zombies, right? It feels pretty decent to play. I can't really say much more than that. It feels a little bit. It honestly feels a lot like Resident Evil 4. Like somebody played Resident Evil 4 and said, what if we, instead of doing zombies, we did supernatural stuff? Other supernatural stuff, I guess. Zombies are somewhat supernatural already. But, the environments were pretty claustrophobic feeling. It definitely felt like a decent enough horror game because everything was closed in. Everything was kind of right there, breathing down your neck. If there was an enemy that tried to charge at you, they were right there. It wasn't quite like in Resident Evil 4 or even the later ones like Resident Evil Village, where some of the combat areas were a little bit wider and you had a little bit more room to breathe. In this one, everything felt pretty closed in. You were walking down corridors that had a lot of like lighting and shadow effects, and made it feel very, very spooky. So, at the very least, it seemed like a pretty fun one of those. If you are into action horror stuff, this definitely is, it's definitely going for that kind of feel. Now, this is the common complaint with a lot of horror games is it's only scary right up until you start finding so many resources that you were kind of starting to just overcome the horror with just a sheer wall of bullets, right? I did find a surprising amount of resources for a game that's trying to go for that Resident Evil style. I found a lot of SMG bullets. I think I found like 2 or 3 med kits. So it was, some of the fears definitely lessened, but it still kind of nailed that aesthetic of just like a creepy corridor that you're walking through and like not a whole lot of room to move around. There was a little bit of jump scare shenanigans in there. There was a moment where I was walking up to kind of this this barracks area, and there was a light shining through a set of clothes that made it look like it was a person, but then it played I think it played like a jump scare sting, and then there was like a electro alien zombie thing that ran up behind me and tried to gnaw my face off, right? So it does seem to go for some of the cheap thrills on that one, but it plays well, which is, again, like that's kind of a nice thing, is that sometimes a lot of these action horror games, they don't play particularly well because they're quote unquote trying to make you feel helpless, which I never really enjoyed. But this one doesn't seem to fall into that category. The guns felt decent recoil, and felt like they actually had some punch to them. The atmosphere was pretty well done, at least in the demo. My only real complaint is that it's almost too much like Resident Evil 4. So, if you're into that, if you want something like that, I think this definitely is your thing. All right, so that was 3 games from Gamescom that I wanted to check out the demos of. If there's anything that you'd like to see, leave it in the comments, and I'll try to check it out.